Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Jared here, and today we are going to be taking a closer look at the Spyderco PM2. We're going to cover everything today, guys. We're going to be doing a disassembly. We are going to be doing a scale swap, a reassembly, and then a tuning. It's going to be a bit of a lengthy video, and I'm going to try my absolute best to keep the pace moving. So, with all that being said, let's get things started. So here we have the Spyderco PM2 S45VN blade steel, black DLC. First, we're going to start things off by removing the pocket clip. We have a T6, a T8, and a T10. Make sure you guys have some decent Torx bits. And a soldering iron for your first time. I'm always going to recommend using a soldering iron to loosen up the Loctite in your knives whenever you take them apart, especially for the first time. You don't have to do it, but it will prolong the longevity of your screws. Because even with the right equipment, doing it the right way like this, you can still strip your screws, and it's a pain in the ass. So here we're starting out with the pocket clip. These are the T6s. These are going to be the ones you're going to be most likely to strip. And right now we are just loosening them, getting everything nice and loose, ready to be ripped open. Okay, now that everything has been loosened up on the back side, we are going to be taking out the pocket clip and then turning things over to the show side. Now, you don't have to take the pocket clip off, but I like to do that because it makes things easier, and I'm all about making things easier. So now we have the pocket clip off, we are going to the show side, and we're going to be doing the same thing, but this time we're going to be backing everything out, and we're actually going to be removing these 3 screws. So we're going to start with the pivot. That's the T10. And then we're going to go to the stop pin, which is the T8. And we're also going to be using another T8 for the body screw. Now there are other ways that you can loosen the Loctite. I've seen people use hair dryers. I've seen people put it into boiling water. This is the best method that I found. At the end of the day, we just want to heat the Loctite to loosen it, and there are multiple ways to do that. This is, in my opinion, the easiest way and one of the most effective, so this is just how I do it. So now that everything's been loosened, we are ready to start backing everything out. We have the pivot, the stop pin, and then the back body screw. Those are going to be the only ones that we're going to actually remove for the time being. Now I also like to mark where I put my screws, so you see the S, and then next to that is going to be a B. It just stands for the show side and the back side. I just like to keep all the screws and all the hardware oriented in the way that I received it from the manufacturer. It's just kind of like a little OCD thing that I do. Not sure if it makes an actual difference or not. So now we can peel the scales off and then fan it open from the lanyard tube right here. And be careful that you don't lose the washer when you do this. Now, if you just wanted to do a cleaning on this and maybe polish your washers, you could just take the blade off right here, take off the pivot and then put it all back together. You wouldn't have to mess with the lanyard tube. But since we're doing a full teardown and a scale swap, we're gonna be removing everything. And I also wanted to show the lanyard tube removal because that's one of the hardest parts. Now this was the easiest lanyard tube I've ever removed by far. It's not as flared as the other ones, but as you can see, you just want to basically peel back and forth, twisting, then peeling, twisting and peeling. You might need to get a screwdriver or a pry bar, because sometimes they can be a little bit more stubborn. But yeah, you can see that it's a little flared on the outside there. That gives it a little more difficulty coming out. So this one, I think I used a pry bar and then a punch to remove it. I don't like using pry bars, or I don't really like using anything that's gonna make marks on the steel. I try to avoid that. So we have a punch here, and this works really well. And it pops right out. I like to remove the lanyard tube like this because it is the least, the likelihood of damaging the liners is the lowest using this method. I don't want to bend my liners because that is a really easy way to get a lot of blade play and just really poor tolerances. So now we are removing the pivot. And that side of the pivot, the back side, has a little D shape that keeps the pivot from free spinning. Just something to remember. Yeah, sometimes that's why we loosened it on that side first with the pocket clip, because we don't have any leverage to hold down that standoff, so to loosen it. So we wanted to get it loose while we still had some tension on the other side. Otherwise, we would have to take a pair of pliers and hold the standoff and then probably scratch it, and it's just not a good time. So that's why we loosened it on the back side first. All right, cool. So now the scale is officially separated from the liner. We're going to do the same thing with this side. Very easy with that one. We got the scales, and yeah, we are ready to go. So at this point, you can do some cleaning. You can remove some of the Loctite on your hardware if you want. You could polish the washers. I have a video on that. And then you are basically ready to either A, reassemble it, or B, get some new scales and reassemble it. Either way, we're going to cut to the next segment of the video, which I recorded in the future. This video is from the past because I lost some of the footage, and we have some new Flytanium scales, so it'll be a more recent install. So I'll see you in a minute. Alrighty guys, now that we have everything broken down, cleaned, and disassembled, we are ready to begin the reassembly process. Now, if you aren't doing a scale swap, that's cool. Just sit tight for maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll be at the point where the lanyard tubes are all together and you're kind of, just ready to put everything back in and screw it all together in the same way which we took it apart. If you are doing a scale swap, cool, we can start that right now. So I like to start on the back side, and we want to just get the liners into the scales. Now, I like to start on the back side just because of I like to seat the pivot first. It's important to note that you want to get the washer down before you seat the pivot. And the pivot is going to be, remember, we want to do the D side shape, which is the back side, and the D side is always going to be, the flat side is always going to be facing towards us in this orientation. So. Cool. And that's in there. I'm literally just going to get this guy tight. Or not tight, snug. Just enough so it holds. And I felt cross-threaded. Let's try again. Okay. So that's good enough for now. All right, cool. That's done. Let's see. I'm going to actually put the lanyard tube on this side as well. Oh, that's much easier. Okay, pause on that. So we're actually going to get these standoffs in too, because that will also make things easier. We can add the stop pin. And again, we're just trying to get things snug. We're not looking to get them super tight or anything like that. And sometimes, depending on how much Loctite you still have, or just some of the the tightness of the threads in the standoff, sometimes this won't go in very easily. It'll get to the point where it's free spinning. I just use a little piece of rubber right here, hold that down to get a little bit extra grip. Oh, and we're good to go. I'd rather do that than try to get a pair of pliers on there and get some tooth marks on there, because that's not cool. Nobody likes that. Cool, now that we have that side assembled, we are going to work on the other side, and it's the same principle. You just drop it in right there like that. And let's see here. Okay, so that's, we'll leave that there. That's fine the way it is. So we're now ready to basically put the sides right together. All right, so I'm going to use a little bit of pivot oil. Let's see here. Just a couple of drops of KPL. Should be all right. And then we're going to take the blade, seat the blade on. There's a magnet. All right, seat the blade right there. Move it around a little bit, and then we are going to do the same thing, but to the other side. So we're going to take the washer. I'm going to put a drop or two of oil on here. Place the washer. And put another drop on top. Cool. And then I'm going to place the lanyard tube down there like that. And then with this assembly, it's going to be a little loose. But that's okay, because then we can basically just push it right onto the top like that. Okay. Now from here, let's see. I will take the pivot screw, and then again, we're just going to get this snug. And then we're just going to work our way down again from the pivot back. And that's kind of the universal order of assembly when it comes to these types of compression lock knives. You want to start from the pivot and work your way back. Not really sure why that is, but it's just kind of been like the way from what I've seen, and who am I to question that? So cool. Now we're basically together. Yeah, we're a little cross threaded here, so I'm gonna, looks like we were. Okay, cool, so that looks better. So now I'm just kind of messing with the knife, opening it and closing it, because I just want to get everything lined up, make sure all those holes are in the right spot. And it's looking pretty good so far, gotta say, so. Cool. All right, so now we are gonna start from the pivot and start hunkering things down. And we're not looking to be super tight, we're just looking to be a little bit more than snug. We're going to start at the pivot, go to the stop pin, and then the body screws. And then we're basically done at this point. We just need to put the pocket clip back on. So when you do get it back together, the first thing that you're going to want to check is how the action feels. And you want to see if you're getting the kind of drop that you're looking for. So here we are not. But we're centered. So those are really the three things you want to look for. You want to look for the drop, then you want to look for how much lock or how much blade play you're getting. So your lock up, and then you want to look at your centering. So right now we're hitting on 2 out of 3. We have good centering and we have a good lockup, a very strong lockup, but the pivot is just a little bit tighter than we would like. So that means we can loosen it, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So the first thing you want to do is check the pivot, because that's really going to be, again, we're working our way back. So the pivot is pretty much all the way screwed down. Okay, so after that, you're going to want to go to your stop pin. And if you're ever getting if your stop pin is ever like free spinning like this, something that you can do, instead of getting out, you know, two Torxes like this and doing something like that, with the stop pin, if you open it and then press right here up, you can actually push the tang of the blade into the stop pin, and then you can actually get it to move because the blade is holding it down in place. So just a little tip there to save you some time. So yeah, we're going to be loosening the stop pin and seeing what that does. Okay. So we still have a good lockup. All right. So now we could do some relief from the pivot, but I don't want to do that just quite yet. There are other things that you can do. Okay, so a lot of times people will say that the body screws don't do anything, and then like it's all in the pivot and the stop pin, and like that's not true. Like the body screws, they make a difference. They make a difference with your lockup, and they also make a difference, a very small difference. It's like a fine-tuning system. So for example, the tighter we go in the rear, what are we doing? Well, we're taking the two sides and we're tightening these screws. So what's going to happen to the front? And vice versa. So that's just like a little thing that you can remember if you're looking for just a little bit of relief or a little bit of adjustment. Sometimes you have to do it from the back to get the results you want in the front. It's kind of a lot like tuning cars. Sometimes, like, you know, you make a suspension change in the back and it's going to affect the front and vice versa. So we basically just tighten these guys down, hoping that we can get like a little bit more spread in the front and see what that does. Okay, so that didn't really do a whole lot for us, but we still have a really solid lockup and we're still centered. Okay, so that means that we need to go to the pivot. And we're all the way screwed down on the pivot. I like to start with the show side first because it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the, like, I don't like loosening the D side shape, the back side, because of the looser that is, there's more of a chance that it can move around. Now, when it's this screwed down, it's probably not going to do that much, but it's just kind of like one of those things that I do that may not necessarily make a difference. Okay, so our lockup is good, really good, but we're still not getting the drop that we want. Okay, so it's either going to be in the pivot or the stop pin, so we can use the process of elimination here to see which one it is. So right now we are going to back this pivot, back the stop pin screw out to there, right? And let's see if anything has changed. Nothing has changed. So we now know that the action right now is a result of the pivot. So we loosened it a little bit up here. Let's try it on the other side just to keep things even. So we have a little bit of, this will probably drop. Yeah, that drops. Okay. And we are still centered. Okay, so now from here, let's see if we can get this stop pin to do some fine tuning on the pivot for us. Okay, let's see what that does. Still got a little bit of blade play, but it still drops really well, and we're centered. So since we have the drop that we want, and since we're centered, we know that we need to tighten this just a little bit. So let's just give this like the smallest little turn right there. Let's see what that does. Okay. Still got the drop that we want, so we can probably go a little bit tighter. Still a little bit loose. Okay, so let's actually tighten the stop pin a little bit. Make sure that we're actually spinning that stop pin. It's gonna be kind of hard to get. I'm pressing up against the tang so we can, this thing is free spinning a little bit. So this probably won't drop. Oh, it did. All right. So we still have a little tiny bit of wiggle. It drops well enough and we're centered. So right now, if we tighten this pivot, I can just tell you that it's probably not going to drop. Okay, it dropped. Where is that coming from? All right, let's screw this down and see what happens. Is that coming from the left side? I think it's coming from the back side. All right, so it is the pivot that's doing that. Okay. So let's loosen that a little bit, loosen that just a tiny bit, and see where we're at. You know, for most people, I would imagine this is okay. In fact, that should be good enough. But if you're like me and you're super OCD, and I guess you like a challenge, I want to see if we can get this to completely drop shut and to not have any of that. Even though there's never going to be a time where like my blade, like I'm never going to be like thrusting into something and moving it like that to the point where that's going to be an issue. It's just like a little, I guess it's just like an OCD thing. It really doesn't matter. And we're certainly at the point of diminishing returns, but you know, it's kind of fun. I like to tinker with stuff. I like to mess with it. And we're just looking to be a little bit tighter in the front. So when you're at this position where you're going back and forth between making adjustments to the pivot and stop it and pivot, and you're not really getting anywhere, that's a good indication that you need to go to the back screws, to the body screws again. So last time we tightened these, which we tightened these, so that made it the gap a little bit wider. So let's go the opposite way. Let's loosen these and get a little bit more pinch in the front and see what happens. Okay, so that did a little bit. It's really all going to be in this pivot for the most part. I mean, that's pretty much literally almost cut my finger off there. That's awesome. So we've eliminated the sound, but we're just not quite at the point that we want yet. We need to loosen up the front just a little bit. All right, so it's literally gonna be like just a tiniest, smallest turn right there to get it. That's crazy. That amount of rotation just results in exactly what we're looking for. So we're where we want right now with this knife. We are ready to put the clip back on, and we're gonna be good to go. But with the standoffs being this sensitive, I really want to put some Loctite on them. Now, you don't have to do that, but if you really want your, especially when these screws are this screwed down, you don't have to do that. But it'll make things much easier for you if you do use the Loctite. And I've heard stories of people actually losing some of their screws before. Like I read a post the other day in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in of a guy that was looking for a pivot screw because he bought one of these used, and apparently the pivot screw, that's a lot of Loctite. Apparently the pivot screw fell out. The guy's let me get that kind of right down there. Apparently the pivot screw fell right out, like it was so loose. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, how the hell? Like, because I mean, like that's loose, right? But like, how can you not notice that? Like, there's a lot of things that I come across, whether it's on these forums or clubs or stuff like that, where I just kind of sit there and I'm like, how did that guy do that? How is that even possible? Okay, so we're gonna do that again to the other side, and again, that is way too, I go way too heavy with this Loctite. Actually just got this Loctite stick. This stuff is so much better than the blue goop. That stuff just literally gets everywhere. It's such a pain in the ass. Alright, so that's more or less where we want it. Cool. Alright, let's go to the stop pin. Let's start right here, actually. I suppose you could have done the Loctite part before putting everything together. That is so much, oh my god. Before you could have put everything together, but it really doesn't matter because this stuff takes like 24 hours at least to completely set and do its thing. So you have plenty of time. And like of all the knives that I do have, I feel like you don't necessarily, like the Loctite for this isn't like necessarily like a must-have. Like, so my 940, for example, the pivot screw on my 940 is very, very loose. Like it only, in order to get the action that I want, I only can have that thing screwed down maybe like 50% of the way. So I really need to have Loctite in that pivot screw. But with this one, it's Spyderco makes good stuff, what can I say? Okay, so that feels pretty decent. Wow, so we have zero. Absolutely no blade play right there. That's great. Love to see it. Okay, so the stop pin is good. And we're just gonna do the same thing down here. Okay, I believe I had this guy torqued all the way down. This guy was a little bit loose. Okay, are we still centered? Yeah, we're good. It's one of the nice part about these titanium scales. They're very rigid, so it makes things much easier in terms of centering, because one of the biggest issues for centering is a lot of times your liners can be actually bent, and that is a big culprit in unwanted blade play and just a ton of issues. Yeah, we're pretty much exactly where we want to be. Got no blade play. It drops to the point where I want it, and we're centered. Cool. And if you're wondering what this is a piece of tape, because I don't want to get any markings on the on these scales, and I'm kind of OCD about that, so you don't need them. again, it's like one of those things that I like to do that doesn't necessarily need to be done. Like with the Loctite, well no, the Loctite needs to be done, but there's a ton of little things that I do that probably don't necessarily need to be done, but I like doing them anyways, because why the fuck not? I also need to get a better clip for this. Cool. So this is pretty much exactly where we want it. It's good to go. Centered, very tight deployment, and it drops where we want it. Cool. So we are good to go. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.